Hello everyone. In the last video, we had seen how the switch case statements work. And today we are going to learn about how we can introduce our own warnings and errors in the MATLAB command window. Okay, so here I am using the same scenario of the switch case which we had used earlier. So we will be introducing the errors and warnings in the same function. So the last time what we had done is whenever the value of the upper argument was other than add, subtract, multiply or divide, we were simply displaying that the result of for this operation is not available because we were not performing any calculation that we will then finally assign to the result variable here. But in this case, we are trying to introduce warnings whenever we are passing something in oper that does not belong in any of the cases. In that case, we can simply use the warning function by MATLAB. So warning is an internal MATLAB function which lets us throw the warnings in the MATLAB command window here. So now this time if I call this function switching, providing the value of oper which does not belong to any of the cases, in that scenario we will have the warning triggering in the command window. So let's just try calling the switching function and let's give this some numbers and maybe we will try with the remainder as we had done last time. And this time we are not seeing any display information because we have removed it and now we have introduced the warning. And that's why in the command window we see a warning that result for this operation is not available. It is same as what we have included here. And also we can see that in which line this warning is occurring. So when I click on line 12, it takes me to that same line from where it is triggered. So this is simply about the warning, how we can introduce the warning. Now suppose we also want to throw any error for some reason, like user defined errors. So let's consider a case. So I'm not going to write error here. We will introduce our own different case in which we are going to throw any error to the user. So let us suppose that this function switching accept three input arguments right now. But if the user is calling this function with only two arguments, that means suppose they are skipping the oper itself, they are not even passing the third argument and they still want to do some calculation. In that case, let's try to throw some error in the command window so that the user knows that we require the operational argument, the third argument, in order to perform any calculation. So let's write a small if else if case. I will write if nargin here stands for number of input arguments. So if the number of input arguments are less than 3, and I'll also introduce n. In that case, we are going to throw an error in the command window saying that oper argument is necessary to to perform calculation. What calculation? It will be defined on the value of based on the value of oper. So in this case, we have simply assumed that if the number of arguments are less than 3, then the user is only missing out oper, not num2 or num1. So whenever we write nargin is less than 3, that means number 1 will be included, number 2 will be included, but the third argument is not included here. And that's why we are going to throw this error here. So let's just try calling the switching function with and 6 maybe, and as you can see the result is as expected. We wanted to throw an error based on the value that we are passing to the switching function. So right now we did not pass any operation that we want to perform. So MATLAB does not know that, okay, which operation do you want to perform, and that's why we had included this if statement for. And in the if statement we have introduced the error, and that's how we can introduce our own errors. We can define our own custom errors whenever the input is not desired and or if it is not acceptable by a function or something like that, then we can introduce our own errors and warnings. So this is just an example of how we can introduce our own warnings and errors. If in the case here in the otherwise case we have introduced a warning, suppose the user have entered something like a remainder in the last case, and then we had printed out the warning that we are not doing any operation. But then there can be cases like, whenever someone is entering remainder, then you can just warn the user that they are entering something which is not included in the switch cases, but we can still perform some calculation. In that case, we can go on and write any command that you want to do. So suppose maybe result, suppose I will write result will be the summation of num1 and 2. Just an example. So this is what we are doing. uh, so we can do this. That means whenever we are writing warnings, our code will still continue. It will not stop. But whenever we are introducing an error, we will have a dead end. There will be no further calculation, and that's how we cannot proceed in the code. But this is not the case with warning. Even if we have warnings in our code, we can still move forward and we can still include other statements that we want to perform. It's just a warning display to the user that we have encountered something that was not desired. So yeah, that was all about how we can introduce the warnings and errors. I hope you found it useful. Make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel if you found it useful.